Hi, my name is Luna. I live in a quiet little town tucked away in the hills of Bennington, Vermont. The kind of town where the post office still knows your name and the neighbors wave even if they barely know you. I've been here nearly all my life, except for those brief years in Boston with Walter, my late husband. He's been gone 6 years now. Pancreatic cancer took him fast. One day we were planning a trip to Maine. The next, I was holding his hand in a sterile hospital room, whispering to him that it was okay to let go. Grief doesn't hit you like a truck. No. It seeps into the walls of your home and the quiet of your kitchen. It hides in the sound of a faucet or the creak of the back porch. And it lingers in the stillness just after sunset. For a long time, I didn't know who I was without him. But life, in its quiet stubbornness, kept going. So I did too. I retired from teaching science at Bennington Middle School a few years ago. 35 years of chalk dust, lesson plans, and wide-eyed 7th graders who thought Saturn had rings made of cheese. I still miss the energy of that classroom. But now my world is smaller, slower, and honestly, that's just fine by me. Most mornings, I'm out in my garden before the sun crests over the maple trees. The soil here is rocky, stubborn, just like the women in my family. I grow hydrangeas. Mostly blue ones near the fence and pink ones by the back deck. Walter always loved the blue ones. He used to say they looked like something out of a Monet painting. I still talk to him when I'm out there, crouched down in the dirt, pulling weeds or planting new bulbs. Some days, I swear I hear him answer back just a whisper on the wind or a robin's song that feels too well timed to be coincidence. I don't wear gardening gloves. I like the feel of the earth in my hands. I like how it grounds me, no pun intended. The jeans I wear for gardening are threadbare and stained with years of compost and mulch. My daughter-in-law once called them a fashion disaster. But she doesn't understand. You don't wear pearls to plant carrots. Now, about the only person who drops by regularly is my grandson, Caleb. He's 15. Lanky, with shaggy brown hair that always needs trimming and a kind of thoughtful silence. That reminds me so much of Walter. It hurts sometimes. He's a science kid, always talking about stars and gravity and these strange black hole theories I can barely wrap my head around. I nod and listen, asking the right questions to keep him going. Not because I understand, but because I love the way his eyes light up when he talks about something he cares about. Last Saturday, he showed up around 9 in the morning, backpack slung over one shoulder, waving as he walked down the gravel path. "Grandma Luna," he called out. "Ready to conquer the carrot patch?" I laughed. "You just want a sandwich after." "Maybe." He grinned. "But I'm here for the carrots. Promise." We spent the whole morning side by side, knees in the dirt. He told me about a new school that just opened up applications, Rockridge STEM Academy. It's got real observatories, professors who used to work at NASA, and lab equipment that most colleges would be jealous of. He spoke fast, passionately, like the words couldn't come out fast enough to match his heart. Then came the pause. "But it's expensive," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. Mom and Dad already said no. He tried to act casual, but I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of disappointment he couldn't quite hide. It stayed with me for the rest of the day. After all, Walter and I always said our savings were for something that matters. And what could matter more than this? The knock came just after noon on Sunday. I had just finished washing the last plate from lunch when I heard it 3 sharp raps on the front door. No text ahead of time. No call. Just there. When I opened the door, there stood my son, Brian, in a neatly pressed polo and polished shoes. looking like a man on a mission. And beside him, as always, was Tracy, my daughter-in-law. Hair pinned up, makeup flawless, wearing a crisp white blouse and heels. Far too fancy for a Sunday visit in Vermont. "Well, this is a surprise," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Hi," Mom, Brian said with a rehearsed warmth. "We were just in the area. Thought we'd stop by and see you." Just in the area. They live over an hour away in Colony. New York? Nobody's just in the area unless they're heading here for a reason. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Want some tea?" "Oh, coffee would be wonderful," Tracy said, sweeping past me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She glanced around the living room, making soft little sounds of admiration. "Your home looks so quaint, like a magazine photo shoot." I bit my tongue. My home wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd lived in it for 40 years, painted those walls with Walter, and changed the porch screen myself last fall. I didn't need approval, stamped with subtle condescension. Brian sat down on the sofa like a man settling in for business. "How's the garden?" he asked. "Still standing," I replied, heading toward the kitchen to make the coffee. I could hear them chatting in the living room too loudly, too cheerfully, like salespeople trying to warm up a cold lead. I knew this tone. Brian had used it back in college whenever he needed to borrow money for rent or just a little help covering a surprise bill. I had always said yes, and every time, I told myself it would be the last. When I came back with the tray, Tracy had moved to stand by the window, dramatically admiring my backyard. "Luna," she said, "I just can't believe you do all of that on your own. At your age, you must have a gardener." "Nope," I said flatly. "Just me. And Caleb, when he visits." "Oh, how sweet," she replied, though I caught the twitch in her smile. She wasn't used to being corrected. We sat. The air turned still. And then Brian cleared his throat and shifted into what I call his presentation voice. "Mom, we actually came to talk about something important. It's about Caleb." I set my cup down slowly. "What about him?" "Well," Brian leaned forward. "He told you about Rockridge." "Right. The STEM school," I nodded. "It's an incredible opportunity." "Mom, the best science program in the region? Direct pipelines to MIT, Stanford. They've already reviewed his grades. The teachers say he's a perfect fit." Tracy chimed in, tone syrupy. "We've always known Caleb was special." "Luna, you must be so proud." "I am," I said. "Very." Brian continued. "But here's the thing. There's a $8. Zero deposit required to secure his spot. And, well, things have been tight." "Tight?" I nearly laughed. They drove up in a brand new Toyota Highlander, leather seats still smelling like the showroom. Tracy's diamond earrings caught the afternoon light like flashbulbs. But I didn't say a word. Brian pressed on. "We tried to get a loan, but the bank didn't approve it. You know? With the mortgage, the car, all the obligations." He looked at me with those same eyes that used to ask for extra dessert as a child. Now they asked for something else. "Mom," he said softly, "we know you have the savings. From Dad's life insurance. From the old Ford truck you sold last spring. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." I looked at them both. Tracy nodded. Hopeful. Brian's hands were folded, tense. And in the back of my mind, I saw Caleb's face lit up with passion when he talked about planets, about space, about possibility. It was hard to say no to that face, but it was even harder to ignore the pit forming in my stomach. I need to think about it, I said, my voice steady. It's a lot of money, and I want to be sure. Brian nodded. Too quickly. Of course. Of course. It's just, time is short. They'll give the spot to someone else by Friday. I'll call you in a couple days, I replied. Rising to take their empty cups, they left not long after, with hugs that felt scripted and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. As their SUV disappeared down the road, I sat on my porch, watching the blue hydrangeas sway in the breeze, and I whispered, Walter, I don't like this feeling. I don't like it one bit. The next few days passed in a kind of mental fog. I tried to keep my routine. I weeded the garden, went to the library, met with my knitting group, even made blueberry muffins for the ladies down at the church. But the conversation with Brian and Tracy clung to me like humidity pressing. Uncomfortable. Inescapable. Every time I looked at Caleb's photo on the mantle, my heart twisted. That boy had such a good soul. So much potential. So much light. Was it right to let money, just numbers in an account, stand in his way? But then I'd remember Brian's tone. Polished. Controlled. And that car. That leather interior. High end. Brand new Highlander. Parked like a trophy in my driveway. Something wasn't sitting right. On Wednesday, I decided to drive down to Albany. I needed a change of scenery. A new tablecloth. Maybe something to get me out of my own head. I told myself it was just a small outing. But deep down, I think I was running from my own indecision. I parked at Crossgates Mall, a place I rarely visited, and strolled past the usual displays of mannequins, food courts, and overpriced hand soaps. I wasn't in the mood for shopping, so I lingered near the indoor fountain, sipping on an iced tea, watching people come and go. That's when I saw him. Caleb's friend, Miles, was sitting with a group of teenagers near the fountain. I recognized his curly hair and big laugh. He'd been over for grilled cheese sandwiches more than once. I walked over and smiled. Hey, Miles, I said warmly. He looked up, surprised. Mrs. Sanders, hey, you out playing hooky today? I joked. He laughed. Nah, we're just hanging out. We were gonna hit the new space exhibit at the Science Center. Caleb said he couldn't come, said he was going shopping with his parents again. My smile froze. Shopping, I repeated, trying to sound casual. Yeah. Miles shrugged. That's like the third time this month. I nodded politely, said goodbye, and made my way toward the home goods store. Though I no longer had any real interest in tablecloths. Something tugged at me. A hunch? An itch? I couldn't explain it. On the second level of the mall, just past the food court, sat Coach. One of those stores with lighting so soft it feels like a museum. I walked by slowly. I don't know why I looked inside, I truly don't, but when I did, my stomach dropped. There they were. Brian and Tracy. Tracy stood at the counter, holding a caramel-colored handbag like it was spun gold. She was smiling, beaming. Really. While Brian leaned against the counter, pulling his credit card from his wallet. Off to the side, Caleb sat on a leather bench, face buried in his phone, legs bouncing in that restless way teenagers do when they're somewhere they don't want to be. I ducked behind a pillar, my heart thudding. I told myself to walk away, to mind my business. But then I heard Tracy's voice. The saleswoman practically tripped over herself. She laughed. Did you see her face when I asked for the new collection? Like we didn't belong here. Brian chuckled. Hey! You deserve it. Let her be jealous. You earned that bag. Tracy said, turning the purse in her hands. Melissa from the clinic is gonna drop dead when she sees me with this. I pressed myself against the marble column. My palms were damp. My cheeks burned. Tracy slid her arm into the purse strap like a queen donning a crown. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. Did you call your mom about the money? Yeah. Brian replied. She's thinking about it. Told me she needs more time. Tracy rolled her eyes. It's always some drawn-out moral process with her. If we need the money, what's there to think about? Brian shrugged. I asked for $8,000. Not too little to seem desperate. Not too much to scare her off. It's the sweet spot. I froze. The bag. The lies. The shopping trips. The manipulation. It wasn't about Caleb. It never was. I stood behind that pillar for what felt like hours. My hands were trembling. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The voices of Brian and Tracy faded into the background as my mind played back every moment of the last few years. Every favor. Every emergency. Every time Brian said, just this once. Mom. We're in a tough spot. There was always a reason. The roof leak. Tracy's back therapy. Caleb's supposed summer camp. A laptop Brian needed to get promoted. I had always said yes. Always justified it to myself. They're just struggling. They'll get back on their feet. But it had never been about getting back on their feet. It had always been about how much they could get from me before I said no. I drove home in a haze. Barely remembering the highway turns or the music on the radio. When I pulled into my driveway, the hydrangeas were glowing pink in the golden light of late afternoon. I sat in the car with the engine off, just listening to the silence. Then I got out and walked slowly to the bench by the garden. I sat there, staring at the flowers, trying to calm the whirlwind inside me. Walter. I whispered in my head. I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. Walter had always been the firmer one. He loved Brian deeply. But he saw his weaknesses clearly. He used to say, Luna, love isn't giving someone everything they ask for. It's teaching them when to stand on their own. But I hadn't listened. I had wanted to believe Brian was just going through rough patches. That it wasn't manipulation, it was just life being hard. Until now. Now. I couldn't pretend anymore. The next morning, I called my daughter. Morgan. If anyone could help me make sense of what to do, it was her. Morgan was the opposite of Brian. Grounded. Honest. Sometimes to a fault. She lived a couple of hours away in Burlington, in a modest ranch-style home with her husband Eric. She didn't ask me for money. She didn't flatter. But she always showed up when it mattered. When I told her what I'd seen at the mall, there was a long pause on the phone. I'm so sorry. Mom, she said finally. But I have to ask, are you really surprised? I hesitated. I guess I didn't want to believe it. I admitted. I thought maybe he'd changed. She sighed. He hasn't. You just didn't want to see it. Morgan invited me to visit that afternoon. I packed a small bag and drove north. The fall trees were beginning to blush orange along the interstate. But I barely noticed. When I arrived, she had a pot of tea already waiting. We sat at her kitchen table. Sunlight slanting across the wood floor. And I told her everything from the conversation on the porch to the moment I saw Tracy slide her arm into that handbag like she was royalty. Morgan didn't interrupt. She just listened. Then, she went to a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were photocopies, checks, bank transfers, text screenshots. He asked me for money too, she said quietly. Said it was for Caleb's science camp 2 summers ago. $4,000. My stomach dropped. Caleb didn't go to any camp. Morgan continued. I found out later they spent it on a week-long spa package for Tracy. Same thing last fall. He said it was for a physics tutor. I gave him $2,500. Turns out, he used it to buy a gaming laptop. I covered my mouth. I couldn't breathe. I tried to tell you back then, she added, voice gentle. But you didn't want to hear it. She was right. I had ignored every red flag. I had let love cloud my judgment again and again. What should I do now, I asked. Barely above a whisper. Morgan looked me straight in the eye. You protect yourself. And you protect Caleb if you still can. But you stop enabling Brian. This is where it ends. Mom. No more yeses. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I sat at the edge of Morgan's guest bed for a long while, staring out at the maple trees beyond the window. The early October air carried a sharpness that made the leaves glow with color. It was the kind of morning Walter would have called honest. No hiding. Just crisp truth in the air. And I was done hiding. I drove straight back to Bennington. And before I could change my mind, I picked up the phone and dialed Brian. He answered on the second ring. Hey! Mom! I've been trying to call you. I know, I said. Can we talk? In person. There was a pause. Sure? When tomorrow? I'll come to your house. 9:00 a.m. Hay hesitated. Okay. Is everything all right? Not yet, I said. And hung up. I arrived at 8:59 sharp the next day, wearing my best navy sweater and the necklace Walter gave me for our 30th anniversary. I didn't dress up for them, I dressed up for me. To feel grounded. Clear. Tracy answered the door. Startled. Oh, Luna. We weren't expecting you so early. It's 9. I replied. Brian came to the doorway, smiling, like nothing had happened. Come on in. Mom. Coffee? I'm fine, I said, stepping into the house. I noticed the small details first. The new espresso machine on the counter, a fresh designer candle burning near the entry table, and that Coach purse casually tossed onto a chair like it was no big deal. We sat in the kitchen. Tracy crossed her legs tightly, her smile fixed but twitching. Brian leaned back like a man who thought he had the upper hand. I've made my decision, I said. They both sat up straighter. I'm not giving you the money. Brian blinked. Wait. What, I'm not giving you $8,000? Tracy let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Luna. You can't be serious. This is your grandson's future we're talking about. I am serious, I said calmly. Which is exactly why I'm going to contact Rockridge directly and pay the school myself. If Caleb's been accepted, I'll handle the deposit in my name. No cash will go through either of you. Brian's face went cold. You don't trust us. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Tracy slammed her coffee mug down. This is controlling. Luna. Invasive. You're trying to hijack our parenting. You tried to hijack my trust, I said. And you used your son's dreams to do it. The silence was electric. I saw you at Crossgates, I added quietly. Buying the bag. Heard you say it was a sweet spot. Not too much. Not too little. Just enough to make me hesitate. but not say no. Brian's jaw clenched. You were spying on us. I was shopping for a tablecloth, I replied. And I heard the truth for the first time in a long time. Tracy stood up, hands on her hips. You have no right. I have every right. I interrupted. To protect Caleb, and to protect myself. Then, from the hallway stairs, we heard a voice. Is it true? Caleb stood on the bottom step, barefoot, his eyes wide. Tracy's voice softened in panic. Sweetheart, is it true? He repeated, staring at his parents. You lied to Grandma about the money. Brian stood up quickly. Caleb, you don't understand. No. Caleb cut in. I think I do. He turned to me. Grandma, do you still want to help me go to Rockridge? I felt my throat tighten. Yes. Sweetheart. I do. He nodded, eyes brimming. Then I want to go with you. Absolutely not. Brian snapped. You're a minor. You live here. This is not up for debate. Caleb didn't back down. Then I want Grandma to stay while we talk. All of us. Truthfully. The room cracked open then. Everything that had been buried manipulation. Resentment. Guilt rose to the surface, and in the middle of it stood Caleb. Not a boy anymore, but a young man choosing honesty over comfort. Brian sat down heavily, rubbing his face. And I knew this wasn't over. But the truth was finally on the table. That night, Caleb came to my house with a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder and eyes too tired for a 15-year-old. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat at my kitchen table, quietly sipping the hot cocoa I made extra marshmallows. Just the way he liked it. I didn't mean for it to blow up like that, he said finally. Voice small. You didn't do anything wrong. I told him. He looked down at the steam rising from the mug. Dad says I embarrassed them. That I took your side over family. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Telling the truth isn't betrayal. It's courage. He didn't answer. But his hand didn't move. The next morning, Brian showed up alone. His face was pale. Drawn. Like a man who hadn't slept. Tracy wasn't with him. He didn't knock. Just stood at the edge of my front porch. Arms crossed. Like he didn't quite know whether he wanted to fight or apologize. I'm here for Caleb, he said flatly. He's inside. I replied, but I think we should talk first. A looked past me, trying to see into the window. He's a minor. You know that. I could call the police. You could, I said calmly. But he came here on his own. You know that. Brian. And if you force him back without listening to him, you're going to lose a lot more than control. He sighed. Ran a hand through his hair. I messed up. That surprised me. I had expected defiance. Anger. But what I heard was something else. Awe, man unraveling. I don't know when it started. He continued. We just kept falling behind bills. Expectations. Lifestyle. And every time we got close to drowning, I thought, maybe Mom can help. Just this once. But once never stopped. You used your son's dreams, I said quietly. You used him to manipulate me. I know. The words hung there between us. You always loved Morgan more, he added suddenly, his voice hardening. She was the golden child. I always had to fight for your attention. I took a slow breath. That's not true. But even if it were, this isn't about attention. This is about honesty. About respect? He looked down at the floorboards. So now what, you can still be his father? I said, but you have to earn back his trust. And mine. Brian nodded. Once? Like a man who knew he was standing at the bottom of a very long climb. In the days that followed, I reached out to Rockridge Academy directly. Caleb's recommendation had been received. His application had been marked incomplete due to the missing deposit. I told them I would be paying personally, and I wired the money the next morning. I also worked with my bank to set up a college fund in Caleb's name. One that no one else could access, not even me. He wouldn't know about it right away. I didn't want him to carry the weight of gratitude. I just wanted him to have a shot at something better. At something honest. The letter came a week later. It was from a lawyer in Colony. Drafted by Tracy. It said I was no longer permitted to contact Caleb without parental permission. It said I had overstepped, manipulated, and interfered in matters that did not concern me. I sat at the kitchen table. The letter open in front of me. My hand still. Then I folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. And I did the one thing I had always done when the world didn't make sense. I went to the garden. It was October now, and the hydrangeas had faded to pale copper. The air smelled like earth and old leaves. I knelt down to pull out the last of the summer weeds. My knees ached. My back cracked. But I felt steady. Behind me, the gate creaked. I turned to see Caleb. Backpack slung over his shoulder. That same thoughtful look in his eyes. I walked over from Miles' house. He said, "Mom doesn't know. You shouldn't be here." I whispered, standing slowly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to say thank you." "You don't have to, I do." He cut in. "You didn't just believe in me. You told the truth when it was hard. You showed me how to stand up." He paused. "And I'm going to Rockridge. Thanks to you." I felt something break loose in my chest, some knot of tension I didn't know I'd been carrying. "I love you, Caleb," I said. "I love you too, Grandma." He hugged me hard, then disappeared back through the gate. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my lap, watching the sky darken to indigo. I looked up at the first stars appearing in the night sky and whispered, "Walter, our boy's going to reach the stars." And for the first time in years, I felt at peace.